The bitter winter wind howled across the Black Hills as Martha Jane Canary, better known as Calamity Jane, trudged through knee-deep snow on the outskirts of Deadwood. February 1876 had brought the harshest winter folks could remember to Dakota Territory. Jane pulled her worn buckskin jacket tighter, the whiskey in her flask doing little to ward off the cold. She was returning from a supply run when she spotted something unusual against the white landscape, a splash of color half buried in snow. Beneath a stand of pines. Drawing closer, she realized it was a man, a Lakota warrior, barely breathing, with an ugly gunshot wound in his side. "Lord Almighty," Jane muttered, kneeling beside him. The young brave's eyes fluttered open, filling with fear at the sight of her. "Easy now," she said softly. "I ain't gonna hurt you." Blood had soaked through his clothing and frozen in the bitter cold. Jane knew the local sentiments toward natives. They'd sooner put a bullet in him than offer help. The brave tried to speak, wincing in pain. "White men ... shot. No warning." Jane nodded grimly. Relations between settlers and the Lakota had deteriorated since gold was discovered in these sacred hills. General Custer's recent expedition had violated the Fort Laramie Treaty, bringing thousands of prospectors flooding into Sioux territory. "Name's Jane," she said, uncorking her flask and offering it to him. "What's yours?" "Running Torch," he answered, accepting a small sip. Jane assessed his wound. "Can't leave you here. You'll freeze by nightfall." Decision made. She fashioned a travois from pine branches and her coat. With considerable effort, she managed to get him onto it. "Got a place not far," she explained. "Not much, but it's warm." As she dragged him toward her small cabin on the edge of town, Running Torch studied her face. "Why you help your people, hate mine?" Jane snorted. "Hell, half the folks in Deadwood hate me too." Never much cared what people think. The truth was more complicated. Jane had spent years on the frontier, earning a reputation as a scout, sharpshooter, and occasional army nurse. She'd seen the brutality inflicted on native peoples and the broken promises of the government she sometimes served. "My fight's with whiskey and cards, not with you or your people," she added, trudging forward. "Besides, leaving a man to die in the snow ain't my style." Little did Jane know, as she pulled the wounded warrior toward shelter, that her act of basic humanity would soon bring 200 Lakota warriors to Deadwood's doorstep and place her squarely between two worlds ready to explode into violence. Jane's cabin was little more than a one-room shack, but it offered shelter from the biting cold. She helped Running Torch onto her narrow cot and set to work examining his wound by lamplight. "Bullet went clean through," she announced, cutting away his bloodied garments. "You're lucky. 6 inches to the right, and we wouldn't be having this conversation." She cleansed the wound with whiskey, causing him to hiss in pain. "Sorry," she murmured. "Ain't got much in the way of medicine." Running Torch observed her calloused hands working deftly. "You have healed wounded before." "Served as nurse during the campaigns," Jane replied, not looking up. "Seen more bullet wounds than I care to remember." As she worked, Running Torch revealed he was the son of Thundercloud, a respected Lakota chief. He'd been hunting alone when ambushed by bounty hunters who mistook him for another warrior with a price on his head. "They shot first," he said bitterly, "then saw I was not who they sought." Jane nodded grimly as she finished bandaging his side. "Some men don't bother looking close when it comes to Indians. Figure one same as another." By morning, Running Torch's fever had broken. Jane prepared a thin stew from jerky and shared what little food she had. "My father will wish to thank you," Running Torch said, sitting up gingerly. Jane waved him off. "No need for that. Anyone with a shred of decency would have done the same." "No," he said firmly. "Many would have left me to die, or worse. A life debt is sacred among my people." Jane shifted uncomfortably. "Well, you need to rest one more day. Then I'll help you get back to your people before anyone in town realizes you're here." That evening, Wild Bill Hickok stopped by Jane's cabin, bringing a bottle and news from town. "Word is Colonel Merritt's bringing troops to clear the hills of Indians," Bill said, unaware of Jane's guest hidden behind a curtain. "Claimed they're violating the treaty by raiding settlements." "That's horse shit, and you know it," Jane snapped. "It's the prospectors trespassing on their land." Bill shrugged. "Just telling you what I heard. Best stay clear of it, Janie. This powder keg's about to blow." After Bill left, Running Torch emerged. "Your friend speaks truth. My people prepare for war to defend what is ours." Jane felt a knot form in her stomach. "War's only good for undertakers." "Some say it is already decided," Running Torch replied solemnly. "But I will remember your kindness, Calamity Jane." The next morning, Jane helped Running Torch to the edge of the forest at dawn, ensuring no one from town spotted them. As they parted, he clasped her hand. "We will meet again," he promised before disappearing into the trees. Jane watched him go, unaware that their paths would cross much sooner than either expected. By noon the following day, Jane was nursing a whiskey at the Gem Saloon, trying to forget the turmoil brewing between settlers and natives. The saloon buzzed with the usual crowd of miners, card players, and working girls. All Swearingen, the Gem's proprietor, was holding court at the bar when the batwing doors burst open. Colorado Charlie, a local prospector, stumbled in, his face ashen. "Indians," he gasped. "Hundreds of them, coming up the gulch." The saloon fell silent before erupting in chaos. Men rushed for weapons while women screamed, "Hold your horses!" Swearingen bellowed, "Charlie, you sure about this? Saw 'em myself." Painted for war, headed straight for town. Jane felt her blood run cold. Had her helping Running Torch somehow triggered this? Wild Bill appeared at her side. "This could get ugly, Jane. Best find somewhere to hunker down." She ignored him, pushing through the crowd to the saloon's entrance. Outside, townsfolk were arming themselves, barricading doors, and preparing for battle. Sheriff Seth Bullock was attempting to organize a defense when Jane spotted the dust cloud rising from the gulch. Within minutes, mounted warriors appeared, their faces painted, feathers and weapons glinting in the midday sun. Jane counted at least 200. "Christ Almighty," breathed Bullock. "We're outnumbered 5-1. To everyone's surprise, the warriors didn't charge. Instead, they formed a semicircle around the town's edge, weapons ready but not attacking. A single rider advanced, an older chief wearing an elaborate headdress. Beside him rode Running Torch. "That's Thundercloud," someone whispered. "The fiercest war chief in these parts." Jane stepped forward despite Bill's attempt to hold her back. "Jane, don't be a damn fool," she shrugged him off. "I know why they're here." Silence fell as she walked into the street. Running Torch spotted her and smiled, saying something to his father. The chief studied Jane intently, then dismounted. "You are the one they call Calamity Jane?" Thundercloud asked in accented English. "I am," she replied. conscious of rifles trained on the chief from windows and rooftops. "My son lives because of you," the chief stated. "When others of your kind would have left him to die, you showed compassion." Behind her, Jane heard murmuring from the townsfolk. "We have come not for war," Thundercloud continued, "but to honor a debt. The woman who saved my son must be respected by all Lakota." From behind, Sheriff Bullock approached cautiously. "Then why come armed for battle?" "Thunder." Cloud's expression hardened. "Because your kind has taught us to expect bullets, not words." Jane intervened. "Perhaps we could talk somewhere less exposed, before someone gets jumpy and does something stupid." Thundercloud considered this, then nodded. "3 of my men will accompany me. The others will remain here." Jane led them toward the gem, hearing swearing and curse under his breath as they approached. This day just keeps getting better. The gem saloon had never hosted such an unusual gathering. Thundercloud, Running Torch, and 2 Lakota warriors sat at a table across from Sheriff Bullock, Mayor Starr, and a visibly uncomfortable Swearingen. Jane stood between the groups, an unlikely mediator. "Whiskey?" Swearingen offered, breaking the tense silence. Thundercloud declined with a gesture. "We come with purpose, not to drink." Jane cleared her throat. "Chief Thundercloud says his people aren't looking for a fight today." "Could have fooled me," Swearingen muttered, eyeing the 200 warriors still positioned outside town. Bullock leaned forward. "Then state your business plainly, Chief." Thundercloud's weathered face remained impassive. "The sacred Black Hills belong to the Lakota by treaty with your government. Yet your people come with shovels and axes, taking what is not yours." "The treaty," Mayor Starr began, but Thundercloud cut him off, "is broken daily by white men. We have been patient, but patience ends." A tense silence followed. Through the window, Jane could see armed townsfolk and warriors watching each other warily. "What exactly are you proposing?" Bullock finally asked. "A new understanding," Thundercloud replied. "One based on respect, not paper promises that turn to dust." Running Torch spoke up. "This woman," he gestured to Jane, "showed that some among you have honor. Perhaps others do as well." Jane felt uncomfortable being cast as some kind of hero. "I just did what anyone should have done." "But few would have," Thundercloud countered. "This is why we propose trade between our peoples. Controlled access to certain areas for mining in exchange for medicines, food, and guarantees against further encroachment." Mayor Starr scoffed. "You expect us to limit prospecting based on your say-so." Before Thundercloud could respond, the saloon doors burst open. George Hurst, the powerful mining magnate who'd recently arrived in Deadwood, strode in with several armed men. "What's this I hear about Indians dictating terms in my town?" he demanded. Jane saw Thundercloud's warriors tense, hands moving toward weapons. "Your town?" Thundercloud rose slowly. "These hills were Lakota before your grandfather drew breath." Hurst sneered. "These hills are American soil now, and I've got the mining claims to prove it." Jane stepped between them. "Mr. Hurst, with all due respect, we're trying to avoid bloodshed here." "Stand aside, Calamity," Hurst snapped. "This doesn't concern women or drunks." In one swift motion, Jane drew her revolver and leveled it at Hurst. "I'm both, and I'm concerned plenty." The room froze. Outside, warriors, noticing the commotion, began moving closer to the saloon. "Everyone calm down," Bullock ordered, hand on his own weapon. "Hurst, these people came to talk, not fight. I suggest you listen." For a tense moment, Jane thought Hurst might escalate. Instead, he adjusted his coat and forced a cold smile. Very well. Let's hear these proposals. As dusk fell, lanterns flickered to life throughout Deadwood. The negotiations had moved to the Grand Central Hotel, where representatives from both sides sat around a large table. Maps of the Black Hills lay spread between them, marked with proposed boundaries. This area remains sacred ground, untouched, Thundercloud insisted, indicating a section of the hills. Hurst frowned. That's where the richest veins run. And that is why it must be protected, Running Torch countered. The spirits of our ancestors reside there. Outside, the 200 warriors remained, though tensions had eased somewhat. Curious townsfolk now mingled at a distance, studying the visitors. Some children had even approached the warriors, fascinated by their regalia. Jane watched from a corner, nursing a whiskey. She hadn't asked to be thrust into the middle of this brewing conflict. Yet here she was, all because she'd done what any decent person should, while Bill slid into the chair beside her. "You've stirred up quite the hornet's nest, Janie," she sighed. "Wasn't trying to." "Sometimes the right thing creates the most trouble," Bill mused, lighting a cigar. "Proud of you, though." At the table, voices were rising again. "This is robbery." Hurst pounded his fist. "The government granted mining rights throughout these hills. A government that does not own them cannot grant them," Thundercloud replied calmly. Jane saw Hurst's jaw tighten. The man wasn't used to opposition. Sheriff Bullock intervened. "What if we establish a neutral territory? Limited mining with Lakota approval, fair payment for access, and strict penalties for trespassers in sacred areas?" Running Torch translated for his father, who considered the proposal thoughtfully. "And what guarantees do we have that your people will honor this agreement?" Thundercloud asked. "White men's promises are written on water." Jane stepped forward. "I'll guarantee it." All eyes turned to her. "With all due respect, Miss Canary," Hurst began condescendingly, "you hardly speak for, I speak for decency." Jane interrupted. "And I ain't alone." She gestured to Bullock, Wild Bill, and several other respected townsfolk who had joined them. "We'll form a committee to ensure both sides uphold their end." Thundercloud studied her face before speaking. "The woman who saved my son when she had nothing to gain has earned my trust. If she stands for this agreement, the Lakota will consider it." By midnight, they had hammered out terms. It wasn't perfect, Jane knew that, but it was a start. The meeting concluded. Thundercloud presented Jane with an intricately beaded medicine pouch. "You bridged two worlds today," he told her. "Few have the courage." The warriors departed at dawn, returning to their encampment in the hills. Whether the fragile peace would hold remained to be seen. But for now, blood had been averted. As Jane watched them go, Running Torch approached one last time. "My people will remember Calamity Jane," he said. "The woman who saved one warrior and prevented a war." Jane shrugged uncomfortably. "Just did what needed doing." Running Torch smiled. "That is why you are remembered." Later, sitting alone on the steps of the Gem, Jane contemplated the strange turn of events her simple act of compassion had triggered. The mining companies would push back against the agreement. The government would likely disavow it entirely. But for today at least, there was peace in Deadwood. Wild Bill joined her, offering a fresh bottle. "Never figured you for a diplomat, Janie." She laughed, accepting a drink. "Ain't. Just can't stand seeing people hurt when there's no call for it." That's what makes you different, Bill replied, gazing toward the hills where 200 warriors had stood. In a place where most folks only see what they can take, you see what you can give. Jane took a long swig, embarrassed by his praise. Don't go making me out to be some kind of saint, Bill. I'm still the same cursing, drinking troublemaker I was yesterday. Maybe, Bill grinned. But today, they're calling you something else too, Peacemaker. As the sun rose fully over Deadwood Gulch, casting golden light across the ramshackle town, Jane wondered how long the peace would last. But for now, it was enough to know that sometimes, even in the wild frontier, compassion could outweigh conflict.